Now, I have talked to many people entering into relationships over the years, and I have heard all kinds of reasons for falling in love. For people in their 20s, reasons include things like the love interest having a lively sense of humor, making good money, and of course, being nice looking. You are much more likely to have a satisfying marriage for a lifetime when you and your mate are fundamentally similar. Most important, the experts believe that marriage is vastly more difficult with someone whose orientation and approach to life is different from yours. There are many ways partners can be similar, but the experts focus on one dimension in particular: similarity in core values. Marry someone a lot like you. But values are precisely what we should look for if we want a long, happy marriage. Here's where the view from old age is uniquely powerful. Instead of standing at the beginning of the winding trail, barely able to see around the first bend, the experts know the entire terrain. What makes the long journey easy and what makes it difficult or impossible. That's where shared values come in. Of course, there is a catch. To ensure shared values, one must know what one's own values are. John Fordham, 83, has been married to his wife Elaine for 33 years. When asked what the secret to a long, happy marriage was, he responded, "Well, I think that one should know oneself. And then I suppose there's a semi-conscious table of attitudes and values that one uses to find kindred spirits." He explained that you should begin by taking an inventory of what you value and what you believe in. Only then can you understand what would make another person compatible. John says, because by contrast, someone who doesn't seem to fit in with your own outlook, it becomes an issue. This is going to be the closest relationship you will have, except maybe parent-child. You've got to make sure your values align, and to do that you need to understand what's important to you. Gerald Hendricks, age 82, approached this subject in a concrete, methodical way, as he does in all domains of his life. He said, "I thought this out carefully before I entered into marriage. I was married happily for 44 years and I lost my first wife to cancer. I remarried a wonderful woman, so I've had 2 very good, fulfilling marriages. And I did the same thing in both cases. I sat down with both of my girlfriends at the time, and I made a list of the 7 or 8 things that I valued and that I wanted to have from the relationship. Even in my first marriage I did this, which would have been 60 years ago. I asked them both if that was agreeable. I said, if it isn't, I understand, and you can take a pass on me. In both cases, they said yes. I asked for some examples of what was on the list. He said, okay, one was family-oriented, because I value family very highly. I found out that I want somebody who is touchy. I want someone who is not afraid to be touched and who's not afraid to touch. That's very important. And I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about touching. Those were 2 of the things I asked right off the bat. A third was the value of independence. That's part of my freedom. Without that, I'm not me. These are lifestyle things, and it worked. At least it worked for me. With the 2 marriages, I've been supremely happy. Do you need a list? Maybe not. But it clearly makes sense to explore one another's values while you are in the process of committing to a relationship. Ask the question, do we believe the same things in life are important? The experts recommend that at some point after things get serious, you discuss this issue to make sure your core values are as similar as possible. And if a problem develops in a relationship, they suggest that value differences are likely to be at the heart of it. The wisdom of the experts is highly consistent with research findings over the past several decades. Social scientists who study, is there a conflict here? The message to take away from this lesson allows for both perspectives. The experts, like the social scientists, don't tell you unconditionally not to marry someone who is different from you, but with whom you are deeply in love. They simply want everyone to recognize that if we marry people very dissimilar to ourselves, and in particular with divergent values, we are much more likely to face complex challenges in married life. According to the experts, in the face of objective differences, such as race or economic background, shared values and outlook on life will go a long way to promote both the quality and stability of a marriage. One last piece of advice from the experts before we leave this lesson. We have seen that they believe a marriage is unlikely to last without similarity between the partners. But what about taking a leap of faith under the assumption that you can change your partner after you're married? This idea formed the basis of a hit Broadway musical, I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. The title says it all. The experts are as clear about this scenario as can be. Forget about it. According to them, entering into a marriage with the goal of changing one's partner is a fool's errand, one that will doom the marriage before it starts. Allison Hanley, 72, was married for 13 years. The experience had such a profound effect on her that she never remarried. I would say get to know the person well and don't marry very young. I married too young, and in retrospect, it would have been better for me, and I would have been happier if I had been a little bit older and had a stronger sense of myself. I thought that I could make some changes in the person that I married, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. Once I was in the marriage, I became pregnant almost immediately. I realized that it was going to be very difficult to extricate myself, for financial reasons as well as my own strong family values. That's something that I've learned along the way, that I can never change anyone. I can only change myself. Tina spoke with one of our wonderful young interviewers. At one point, Tina asked whether she had a boyfriend. She did. And whether they planned to get married. This kind of thing happened quite frequently with our outgoing interviewers. Our staffer said, it could happen. Hard to say the way things are going right now. I don't know for sure. Tina replied, unless you're sure, don't. And you're not going to change him. If he's got his ways about him, and if you don't like those ways, don't even think about it, because he's not going to change. It's at least 20 years that he's been in this rut, doing what he's doing, so he's not changing. It's very, very rare that a person changes much after marriage. So before entering into marriage, you should examine what you expect to start changing about your mate once the honeymoon is over. Then, ask yourself what it will mean if those things can't be changed. Because in the expert's view, change is unlikely to happen. Indeed, you will have much greater success in changing your own feelings and behavior than in changing your partner's. Marriage is difficult enough, the experts tell us. So why make it even more difficult by choosing a partner who has attitudes or behaviors you can't tolerate? If you are entering into a permanent relationship based on the intention of change, you are on the wrong track. The second lesson, friendship is as important as romantic love. In interviews with the experts, a very common response to the question, what's the secret to a long, happy marriage? Was essentially, I married my best friend. Similarly, from those whose marriages did not succeed, I often heard, well, we were good at love, but we never learned how to be friends. In our culture, however, we are schooled to differentiate between friendship and romantic love. Take the iconic film When Harry Met Sally, which has become a symbol of the gap between the roles of friend and romantic partner. Indeed, television shows like Will and Grace and Sex in the City popularize the view that cross-sex friendship works best, or only, when one of the friends is gay. After marriage, a distinction develops between one's friends and one's spouse. Two separate social categories that have different functions. What are the special qualities of friendship? There's a lightness to it in contrast with marriage. We look forward to being with friends. We relish their company. We relax with them. We share common interests. And usually we talk. In contrast, we all encounter people who do not feel they can talk easily to their spouse. Next time you are out for a fancy dinner, observe the couples who manage only a few uncomfortable words over 2 hours. What the experts suggest is that you look for the qualities of a friend, the capacity to comfortably hang out, in the person you choose to marry. Or as one of the experts told me, think back to the playground when you were a kid. Your spouse should be that kid you wanted most to play with. The expert's point is this: when selecting a mate, don't let love blind you to the need for friendship. The truth is that somewhere along the line, the heart-pounding romantic thrill will become more muted, although we all hope it doesn't disappear. This is where the lens of experience becomes especially useful. The experts have seen in their own married lives a transition from the initial thrill of romantic attraction and, many were honest about it, overwhelming sexual desire, to the stage when other things must become as or more significant. No matter how important the image of being swept off one's feet by true love, the experts caution you to ask, what's next? Will you wake up next to the same person for 5 or 6 decades and still find a person you like, as well as love? You have to be friends first. That's what I didn't know. And you have to be willing to work on it. When we got married 49 years ago, it was the thing to do by the time you were 20. Today, it's not the case. I have a lot of respect for young people who wait until they're 25, 30 years old because the world is so different. We have spoken to young couples and we tell them, you need to be good friends first and respect each other. Love comes and it grows if you are friends for one another. Be sure that you're really good friends. That is the most important thing. All the romance and the bells and the whistles are all very nice, but it doesn't last. Be sure that you're very good friends. In the expert's view, you should marry your friend and, if possible, your best friend. Quite literally, they suggest you consider what you would like in a lifelong friend and look for that in a potential spouse. As a relationship is moving into a serious phase, questions couples can and should discuss are: if we weren't in love, would we be friends? And if we, as most couples do, downshift to something other than heart-thumping passion, what is there that will keep us together? Hint: the answer should not be kids. The answer is friendship, and if you don't have it, don't get married. It's that simple. Romance and love are not the same. A lesson that experience teaches you. Romantic love, from what I've seen, is an insufficient condition for a successful marriage. What is thought to be love at the outset of a marriage is generally a mirage, for love develops slowly in marriage and continues to do so throughout its life. First, there is intense physical attraction, then there is joy of sharing similar activities and interests. The third lesson. When Alvin Baker, an 87-year-old who had been married for 63 years, was asked, "So by that you mean that marriage has to be a 50-50 kind of thing, right? A 50-50 proposition?" He nearly bellowed his disagreement. That was precisely not what he was saying. Don't consider a marriage a 50-50 affair. Consider it 100% or even 110%. That's to allow for the lack of objectivity about your own 100%. It's got to be mutual. Okay, maybe I was slow on the uptake. It's definitely not 50-50, it's more like 100%. But 100% of what? He went on. The only way you can make a marriage work is to have both parties give 100% all the time. It began to make sense. You can't be calculating 50% in, 50% back. The attitude has to be one of giving freely, and if you start keeping score, you are already in trouble.